Well, the first Friday poetry reading at Heritage Square was a huge success despite the inclement weather. And I mean inclement. I'm not as tough as some of the other poets. Maybe I'm not as poetic as some of the other poets, but I don't like being out in the rain, especially when it's 60, 65 degrees. So luckily, Aloe, one of my former students, loaned me his hat, and I had a little jacket in the car. But this is post waterlogged Rosemary. Um, I apologize for that. I only brought a couple of poems with me tonight anyway, and did not read because I wanted to make sure that my colleagues were able to showcase the work that they had so kindly volunteered to bring to the event. And it was really only because of them that it was the success that it was. So I'm so grateful to the four of them for having come out and read. Elizabeth McNeil, Mike Cryer, Mark Honshield, and Allison Bogus. Thank you so much, you guys. You were all fantastic tonight. Hope everybody enjoyed your work as much as I did. So I'm going to go ahead and read the four poems that I had planned on reading tonight, if there'd been enough time and if it hadn't been raining and if people had felt like hanging out. No one did because the weather was horrendous, but it was still a great success. So these are all part of a series called Storytelling. I've been playing with concepts of fiction, fictional techniques, character sketches, different elements of plot, scene. So there are unnamed characters in these poems, just a male and a female persona that are interacting, or at least I'm imagining them interacting in a way that fictional characters would at different points in a story, and I think the titles are all reflective of that, and it's probably more explanation than you needed. The first one is entitled Introductions. He was jealous. She was magnetic. He posed the following question: how can a poet be dismissive of emotion? Imagine 2 a.m., the hot anger that follows at 6:45, alluring and tragic like an army of lovers, the successes and mania, the hypnotic qualities of Roman history and its mythic fictions. Nothing well constructed falls in 9 days. This, he said, is a literal fiction, a hollow dismissal, a hard anvil in the invaded space between a man and a woman's soul. His truth is this: the world is flat, flattened by the craziness of her sins, her intimations of do-overs, the love of dogs and mothers and avocations. But the truth of the narrative is the need of authorship, and the narrative is never ruined. After all, the best stories often start like this, forged in fire. Character banter. He called her as lightning, instructed her not to marry, told her that habituation is a process of adaptation, survival, a runner-up to love or something more organic. He had her number. He told her story. She was Greta, then Brett, and then some amalgamation of falcons slamming, feathers erratic in the skies over Manhattan. Where does a writer go from here? The keys blurring into a soup of confusion and precancerous cells, magnificently woven like strands of cirrus clouds, Phoenix or Manhattan dusk. This one's entitled Elegiac Scene, and it was written about Hemingway's grave, about a visit to Hemingway's grave. He tidies the ground while he waits for death, for 3 p.m. or her psychic arrival. He plays catch with a pine cone. He speaks to Papa, the pilgrim, the ghost in his pocket, then her. They share an O. Henry and a cheap bottle of wine. They are just as lost as the generation before them and the one before that. So she reads from the scriptures, the parable of the solitary man in the skiff, fishing without fish, no miracle of bread or resurrection, flying the flag of permanent defeat. This is when he reads her the letter. I have come a very long way to share a drink with you, unarmored, weather-beaten, alone, not because God was watching, but because it is what men do. He pours the libations as the lawnmowers serenade them. One character confesses to another. Father Harris speaks of God's disappointment, claims he's a sinner 11 years running, that his prayers have done little to impress anyone on the page. He has yet to marry. When he asks, she declines the offer. But guilt is good, and they both know it, like the eyes of Christ know. Like how you know when you see a sideshow, how it battles deep in your soul. He wants to write cliché in the margin, but he senses the righteousness of Father's words. So he writes to her and tells her she's a strange act of God, the water that drowns a man in Costa Rica. And he concludes that love is not a flavor, that love is kinetic, like the act of shoveling rocks, like the plot of a good story. I'm not sure if those were my best, but that's what you're getting. So thanks again, everybody, and hope to see you at many future First Fridays in Heritage Square. It's all about the poetry.